Serena Reddick walked into court with one goal: to quietly gather evidence on a corrupt justice system. But before she could take a single step forward, Officer Troy Kessler handcuffed her in front of everyone, assuming she was just another defiant black woman out of place. He didn't know Serena was a senior intelligence officer and that her phone was about to ring from the Pentagon. What happens when a racist cop arrests the very woman sent to bring his world crashing down? If that made you pause like this video, share it with someone who values justice, and let me tell you how it all unfolded. They cuffed her, right there, smack in the middle of a courtroom. No resistance, no raised voice, just a cold pair of steel restraints and a silence that echoed louder than the judge's gavel. Serena Reddick didn't flinch. She didn't plead. She just looked up calm, still straight into the eyes of the officer who'd just made the biggest mistake of his career. 5 minutes earlier, she was just the woman in the back row. It was a humid Tuesday morning in Radnor County, Tennessee. The kind of day where the air sticks to your skin before you even reach the courthouse steps. Inside Courtroom 2B, the usual crowd had gathered. Families, lawyers, worn-out clerks, and a few bored regulars who came to watch like it was live TV. A minor land dispute was on the docket, routine stuff. But that morning, something felt off. Tense. Like the room was holding its breath and didn't know why yet. And there she was. Serena. A black woman, maybe early 30s. Slim, quiet. Dressed in a pale blue button-down and dark slacks. Hair pulled back neat. No purse, just a plain black notebook on her lap and a pen she never stopped moving. She didn't speak. Didn't fidget. Didn't even glance around. She just kept writing, calmly, deliberately, like someone watching the world from the outside and taking notes. Officer Troy Kessler noticed her first. White, late 40s. Broad shoulders, buzz cut, chest puffed like he was still back in uniform even though he hadn't worn army green in over a decade. He ran courtroom security like it was boot camp. Authority wasn't something he earned. It was something he enforced. And Troy didn't like people who didn't look nervous, especially not quiet black women who didn't act like they were grateful just to be allowed in the room. He eyed Serena from across the courtroom, narrowing his gaze. Didn't recognize her. Didn't like that. He leaned toward a junior clerk and muttered, "You know her." The clerk shook her head. Troy's jaw tightened. Meanwhile, near the front bench, Officer Langston stood post. Younger black, mid-20s maybe. Sharp eyes, soft steps. He noticed Serena, too, but not like Troy did. No suspicion, just curiosity. She reminded him of someone. Or maybe something strength, maybe. The kind that didn't yell. A few rows up a high school field trip sat bunched together, kids fidgeting in their seats, whispering behind clipboards. One girl, though black, probably 15, stared at Serena like she was watching a story unfold. Eyes wide, silent, studying her like she mattered. She would remember this moment for the rest of her life. But not the way she thought. On the other side of the room, attorney Miguel Soto flipped through his case files. Mid-30s, Latino suit, a little wrinkled, but voice always sharp. He paused for just a second, catching Serena's face out the corner of his eye. Something about her struck him. Not just her stillness, her presence. Like she wasn't there to watch, but to evaluate. Like she belonged, somewhere higher. He watched her scribble something in her notebook, lips pressed tight. He blinked, shook his head, and turned back to his files. Back near the entrance, Troy kept watching. His instincts twitched. She wasn't dressed like an attorney. Didn't look like family. Didn't act like press. No badge. No media tag. No motion filed. So, what was she doing here? He adjusted his belt, nodded to Langston, and started walking toward her. Langston watched him move, rigid shoulders, jaw clenched. He'd seen that walk before. The kind officers use when they've already decided you're guilty of something. Something about this felt wrong. Serena never looked up. Not when Troy approached. Not when he stood over her. Not even when his shadow blocked the light. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am. You here for a case?" Serena slowly lifted her gaze, pen still in hand. Her eyes met his steady, unblinking. "No, officer," she said. Her voice was even, calm, measured. "I'm observing." Troy shifted. Observing what exactly? Serena didn't blink. The process. That was it. 2 words. But they landed harder than a courtroom door slam. Troy didn't like that answer. Didn't like how she gave it. Didn't like that she wasn't nervous. Not one bit. From across the room, Langston stepped forward quietly. Just enough to be close, but not enough to interfere. Miguel glanced back, sensing the shift in energy. The teenage girl sat up straighter, heart pounding, not sure why. And Serena finally closed her notebook, folded her hands, looked up. And that's when everything began to unravel. But before we go there, let me tell you what really happened minute by minute, word by word. Because what looked like a simple arrest was anything but. The air inside courtroom 2B had changed. You could feel it. Heavy, quiet. Like everyone knew something was about to happen except the man causing it. Troy Kessler stood tall over Serena Reddick, his hand hovering close to the radio on his belt. But his words hit harder than a baton. So he sneered eyes scanning her notebook like it was contraband, you taking notes for the next riot. A few people looked up, shocked. Miguel Soto flinched in his seat. Langston stiffened near the front. The teenage girl in the gallery gripped her clipboard tighter, but Serena didn't blink. She calmly closed the notebook, folded her hands on her lap, and met his eyes like he was a question she'd already answered. "I'm observing," she said, her voice low but crystal clear. "You nervous?" The room froze. Miguel let out a half-laugh, quiet but loud enough for Troy to hear. Troy turned toward him, face redder than his badge. "You got something to say, counselor?" he snapped. Miguel stood adjusting his tie, stepping forward slightly. "Yeah, I do. There's no law against observing. She hasn't done a thing." "Sit down," Troy barked. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when someone's harassed in open court," Miguel said, holding his ground. "Especially when that someone's done absolutely nothing wrong." Troy stepped closer to Serena, ignoring Miguel completely. "She doesn't belong here," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else, but loud enough to echo. Serena's chin lifted. One slow breath in, one steady breath out. "Maybe this place doesn't deserve her," she replied, like she was speaking not to Troy, but to the courtroom itself. That was it. That was the moment Troy snapped. "Nope. I've had enough of this attitude," he spat. "Stand up." Serena didn't move. For what she asked. He didn't answer. He just reached for her arm. Langston moved instinctively but stopped. His jaw clenched. He wanted to intervene. God, he did. But this was his superior. One wrong move and his badge could be next. Troy yanked Serena up. "You're under arrest for failure to comply with court officers," he declared, already pulling the cuffs from his belt. The clang of metal echoed like a shot. Click, click, done. Serena didn't fight, didn't flinch. She just stood there, wrists bound in front of her eyes, calm as winter glass. The courtroom fell into a dead silence. Even the judge, who'd just stepped into the chamber, froze mid-step. Langston looked away. Miguel stood, frozen lips parted like he was searching for the right words and coming up empty. Across the room, a woman raised her phone slowly. Lisa Greer, local reporter, sharp, always watching. She hit record without a second thought. And the camera caught it all. Not just Troy's face twisted with misplaced pride. Not just Serena's calm. But the absurdity of it all. The black woman being cuffed for nothing. In a courtroom built to represent justice. And on the back bench, the young girl from the school group clutched her chest. Her mouth trembled. She looked at Serena, cuffed, silent, unshaken, and whispered to herself, she didn't even do anything. It was the first time in her life she saw justice, in chains. Troy grabbed Serena's arm and began to walk her out. But Serena turned her head slowly toward Miguel, then Langston, then the little girl. No fear, no panic, just one silent message written across her face. This isn't the end. And it wasn't, not even close. They marched her down a narrow hallway away from the courtroom noise into the quiet hum of the courthouse holding area. The cuffs clinked softly as she walked, but Serena Reddick didn't drag her feet. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She walked as if this was just another hallway she'd already memorized. Inside the holding room, Troy slammed the door behind her and leaned against the wall like he'd just won something. "You thought you were someone, huh?" He chuckled, smug and loud in the silence. "Taking notes like you mattered. Guess you don't feel so big now." Serena didn't move. She didn't even sit. She stood tall, hands cuffed in front of her eyes, scanning the beige walls like they were beneath her attention. Then she turned to Troy, just her head, nothing more, and said in a calm, cold voice, "You just told the world who you are." Troy blinked. The words landed different. Not loud, not angry, but sharp, like a needle under the skin. He scoffed, waved a hand like swatting a fly, and stormed out. But Langston stayed behind. He hadn't said a word during the entire walk. Now, standing just outside the door, he looked down at the ID card that had fallen slightly out of Serena's satchel during the scuffle. He wasn't supposed to pick it up, but he did. It looked ordinary, just a photo name barcode, until he noticed it. In the bottom right corner, a silver-inked symbol, and a code OV7FED. Langston squinted. That wasn't any local code, not state, not even FBI. He pulled out his phone and tried searching the code online. Nothing. Just blank search results and one weird redirect. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom hallway, Miguel stood next to Lisa Greer watching the video she'd just captured. It wasn't the arrest that haunted him, it was Serena's face during it. She didn't even flinch. Lisa whispered, "Why would someone so calm let that happen?" Miguel shook his head. Because she knew something. Or she is someone. Lisa looked up from her screen. She didn't raise her voice once she said more to herself now. People scream when they're scared. But her stillness? It wasn't weakness. It was a warning. Miguel turned to her. "You gonna post it?" Lisa hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. "Then I'll send it to my editor. Let's see what she says." Inside the holding room, the silence stretched. Then Serena spoke again, this time not to Troy, but to Langston, who hadn't realized she could see his reflection in the glass. "You still have a chance," she said softly. "Don't waste it." Langston stepped back, startled. "I don't know what you mean," he said, voice cautious. Serena's lips curved barely. A smile without joy. "I think you do." Langston stood frozen for a beat. Then he turned and left. But he didn't walk away from her words. Not even close. Troy Kessler stood at the small metal table in the holding room, flipping through Serena's belongings like he was owed answers. Langston watched from the corner, arms folded, jaw tight. "She carries a lot of notebooks for someone with nothing to say," Troy muttered, holding one up and flipping through the pages. "You CIA or just paranoid?" Serena said nothing. She stood by the wall, head slightly turned toward them, her expression unreadable. And then it happened. A sharp vibrating buzz cut through the air. Her phone, the plain black device on the table, lit up. One word flashed across the screen in bold red letters. "Pentagon red line." Troy laughed. Loud. Like he couldn't believe it. "You serious?" he said, picking up the phone and waving it toward Langston. "She got hotline access now. What's next?" "She pals with the president." But Langston didn't laugh. He stepped forward slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. "Sir, that's not a regular phone." Troy raised an eyebrow. "No kidding." Langston's voice dropped. "That's a federal protocol device. I've only seen those once before. Military counterintel units use them. It's not just a phone. It's a trigger." Serena finally spoke. Calm, precise. "That call wasn't for me." She paused, then added, "It was a signal." Troy narrowed his eyes. "Signal for what?" Serena met his gaze silent. Troy scoffed, thumbed the screen like he was trying to silence the ringing. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He held down the power button. Nothing. So he did what people like him always do when they're out of control. He yanked open the drawer, grabbed a rubber-lined evidence bag and threw the phone inside it like a hot coal, then flung the whole bag into the corner. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound kept coming. It echoed off the concrete. It made Langston's spine stiffen. Serena didn't move. She simply closed her eyes, took in a deep breath and opened them again, looking directly into the corner of the ceiling, right where the security camera was mounted. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just stared into that camera like she was telling it something with her eyes. And for a split second, Langston could have sworn her lips moved, just barely, like she was mouthing something to whoever was watching on the other side. Troy slammed the table. "You done playing mind games?" Serena turned to him slowly. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "You think you're in charge here," she said. "But that phone didn't ring to warn me. It rang to warn you." Troy opened his mouth to speak but paused. Something had shifted. Outside the door, the quiet courthouse noise had changed. He glanced at Langston. "You hear that?" Langston nodded. Faint at first, then clearer footsteps. More than a few. Fast but steady. Heavier than normal. And getting closer. Inside the holding room, no one moved. No one needed to. Because Serena had already told them what they needed to know. Voiceover, low and steady. And that's when the walls started shaking. Not because someone shouted. Not because of a riot. But because a woman they underestimated took one call. The silence was sharp enough to slice through bone. Troy Kessler stood near the door of the holding room, arms folded, smirking. Serena sat still, wrists cuffed in front of her, her spine perfectly straight. Langston hovered nearby, glancing between them, his unease growing. Suddenly, heavy boots thudded across the marble hallway, approaching fast. A commanding voice barked, "Clear the corridor. This is a federal intervention." Before anyone could react, the courtroom door burst open. 4 federal agents stormed in, weapons holstered, but presence unmistakable. Behind them, in a black suit with a silver badge shining on her chest, walked a tall, composed woman. "Agent Emily Vaughn, DFI Oversight Division," she said coldly. "Stand down. Release Agent Serena Reddick immediately." Troy scoffed. "Excuse me, Agent." Emily didn't blink. "You heard me. She's undercover. On assignment. And your actions just compromised a classified operation." Langston blinked rapidly, stunned. "Serena, a federal agent." But Troy didn't back down. "No, this is a joke," he growled. She resisted. She was spying. Probably some activist. She was investigating corruption in this very courthouse. Emily said, voice steady as steel. "Corruption we now have probable cause to prosecute thanks to your ignorance." Troy's voice cracked. She never identified herself. Serena raised her head slowly and spoke for the first time in minutes. "You never gave me the chance." The room froze. Langston's fingers fumbled at the cuffs, unlocking them with a click that sounded louder than it should have. He stared at Serena as if seeing her for the first time. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, voice low. Serena's gaze softened. "Would you have believed me?" He swallowed hard and didn't answer. Troy looked at Emily, his voice trembling now. "This is outrageous. I want your supervisor now." Emily stepped forward, her badge now mere inches from his chest. "The call you silenced. That was a level 1 encrypted line directly from the Pentagon. You not only ignored it, you destroyed evidence tied to a federal operation." Troy tried to speak. Nothing came out. Emily added, her tone sharper. "You didn't just arrest a federal agent. You assaulted one. You tampered with national security communication. You obstructed justice." His knees weakened. Across the hall, Lisa Greer had her phone up again, streaming live. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "This is happening in real time. Radnor County's darkest hour just got exposed." Within moments, her live stream began to explode, thousands of people tuning in, sharing, commenting. Langston looked at his phone. His own face was already on a thumbnail beside Serena's. Troy lunged forward. "Shut that off. That's unauthorized." Serena stood, calm, controlled, radiating the kind of power that didn't shout. "You dragged me out in cuffs in front of a room full of children," she said. "Now the world sees who the real threat was." Troy's lips parted. Nothing came. Then Emily delivered the final blow. "Officer Troy Kessler. Effective immediately. You are suspended pending federal charges. Turn over your badge weapon and any device on your person." He looked like he might collapse. "You can't do this." Serena stepped in. Her words quiet but cold. "That's the difference between you and me, officer. You used your authority to punish. I used silence to protect a country you don't even respect." She turned toward the hallway, walking past Langston, who stepped aside instinctively. Lisa whispered into the camera. "Agent Reddick, just remember that name." The feed showed Troy backing into a wall as his gun and badge were confiscated. Outside, the courthouse was already surrounded by black SUVs and silent agents moving like shadows. Voiceover soft and firm. When the powerful underestimate the quiet ones, they never see the moment everything flips. The conference room at Radnor County Courthouse had never felt this quiet. The echo of the chaos from minutes ago was still in the air, but inside this room, behind closed doors, it was something else entirely. The stillness wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. Serena stood at the head of the table, her wrists free, her presence controlled. On the table in front of her lay a small black case. With slow precision, she opened it and produced a worn ID card and a separate sleek silver badge. "Serena Reddick," she said evenly. "Defense Intelligence, Task Force 12J. Langston blinked. Miguel exhaled audibly. Even Emily, though she already knew, gave a small nod of respect. Serena turned to the wide wall monitor. "For over 14 months, I've been embedded here, quietly observing patterns of systemic abuse within Radnor's judicial chain. Specifically, officers who used their badge to silence, manipulate, or wrongfully convict Black and Latino citizens." She paused, letting that settle. 87 cases, she continued. 87 citizens misidentified, mishandled, or misrepresented in court, with forged police reports, manipulated surveillance footage, and in some cases, coerced testimony from inside this very building. The screen behind her lit up thumbnails of documents, mugshots, timestamps. Some familiar, some recent. Langston shifted uncomfortably. ID7, Serena nodded. All within the last 3 years, and all waved through this courthouse like routine traffic. Miguel leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. I reviewed 3 of those cases. I knew something was off. But I stayed quiet. I didn't want to lose my license. Or worse. Serena met his eyes gently. You're not the only one, Miguel. He looked down ashamed. That's when Langston stood. I'll testify, he said. His voice was quiet but steady. I saw what happened today. What Troy did. What I let happen. I won't be silent anymore. A beat passed. Then from the back of the room came a voice that didn't match the atmosphere. It was Agent Rowan, a young federal officer who'd arrived with Emily face tight with skepticism. He crossed his arms. So what? We air out a few bad apples and pretend the system's healed. Serena turned to face him, calm but fierce. You think this is about saving the system? Rowan frowned. Isn't it? She stepped closer, eyes locked with his. No, we're not saving it. We're restarting it. That changed the temperature in the room. She continued slowly. We've bandaged this institution with excuses and pretty speeches for decades. But if you keep cleaning mold without fixing the leak, eventually the whole ceiling caves in. We're not here to mop anymore. Emily looked at her. There was something between pride and reverence in her expression. Rowan was quiet. Not convinced, but quiet. Serena looked at everyone in the room now. There's a window right now, this moment. If we move with this evidence, with these voices, we can open the floorboards and show the country what's been crawling underneath. Langston whispered. And if we don't? Serena didn't miss a beat. Then it starts again. Different faces, same bruises, same courtroom. Miguel raised his hand. If we move forward, how far up does this go? Emily answered this time. State-level judges, senior deputies, a few names even reached internal affairs. But the real key, she nodded toward Serena, was her. Being silent enough to be overlooked but loud enough to document everything. Lisa, who had just entered quietly after her live stream was cut short, held up her camera again. This story, people will want to know why no one spoke sooner. Serena turned to her. Then tell them the truth. We were trained not to. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. But not anymore. The room didn't applaud. But they didn't sit still either. Langston picked up the binder Serena had brought in. Miguel opened his laptop and began typing. Emily stepped outside to make a call. And Serena? She disappeared down the hallway, already moving toward the next room, the next name, the next crack in the system. The video Lisa Greer posted hit 5 million views in just under 12 hours. The title alone stopped people cold. Special agent cuffed by local cop Radnor courthouse erupts. By noon, the hashtag #WrongWoman had overtaken trending pages. No music, no edits. Just 33 seconds of Serena being handcuffed, her eyes calm, her voice steady, and Officer Troy Kessler losing control of a room he thought he owned. She didn't post, she didn't speak, she didn't even show her face. But somehow everyone felt her presence. In the silence that followed, America filled in the blanks. Who was she really? Why didn't she resist? What did she know? That we didn't. Major outlets tried to get a quote. Serena declined every request. Instead, she left behind just one line. No press conference, no filter, just a message on the DOJ bulletin. Power doesn't shout. It waits. Those 6 words were enough. It was printed on protest signs in Boston, written in chalk outside a police station in Tulsa, spray-painted on a wall in Oakland, and whispered into classrooms by high school teachers trying to explain what justice should have looked like all along. Langston and Miguel stood in front of a wall of microphones that afternoon. Neither wore their uniforms, just shirts and raw honesty. Miguel's voice cracked first. We saw her as a threat. But the truth is, she was the one person in that courtroom protecting all of us. We failed her, but she gave us a second chance. Langston added slower and firmer. She asked me to think. That was it. Just think. And now that I've seen what we've allowed to grow in this courthouse, I won't be quiet again. Reporters pushed for more names, fallout, future steps. But Miguel held up a hand. You don't fix corruption in a press briefing, he said. You fix it by walking back into the same room where it started and staying. And then there was Kiara. She was the only one in the courtroom that morning who hadn't carried a badge, held a press credential, or worn a suit. just a notebook and a backpack full of dreams. That afternoon, she printed a screenshot of Serena's face the moment she was being led out in handcuffs, yet somehow standing taller than anyone else in the room, and slid it into the clear cover of her binder. When her teacher asked about it, Kiara simply said, "She looked like the kind of person I want to be. Not loud, not angry, just right." The clip played again on late-night news. This time, it wasn't Serena being cuffed that caught attention. It was the moment right before. The stillness, the breath she took, the look she gave Troy Kessler. A quiet that carried the weight of truth too big for anyone to deny. That night, a White House aide confirmed the president had received a security briefing regarding Radnor Courthouse. No statement was released, but Serena's face appeared in the official internal memo marked, "Immediate oversight required." And in the background, as the story rippled from living rooms to news desks to federal offices, Serena Reddick sat quietly in a back room, reviewing transcripts of the last 20 cases tried under Judge Fallon. She hadn't said a word since being released, but the world was now speaking for her. And when Lisa posted one final tweet before going offline that evening, it echoed what millions were already thinking. She didn't raise her voice, but she raised us. They didn't need fireworks. The system trembled all by itself. Troy Kessler was suspended the next morning. By sunset, he was indicted on 4 criminal charges: abuse of authority, obstruction of justice, unlawful detainment, and destruction of federal property. He sat in the holding cell, still wearing the same uniform he thought would protect him forever. His hands shook not from fear but disbelief. "I thought I was untouchable," he muttered, staring through the bars. The courthouse he once strutted through was now swarmed with federal auditors, ethics panels, and silent nods from officers who'd seen too much and said too little. Judge Fallon, once known for her icy rulings and long silences, issued a single-page resignation letter. No press conference, no apology, just one line near the bottom. "This court no longer reflects the integrity I once believed in." Langston walked into his apartment that evening to find a letter waiting on the table. It was sealed with a gold eagle crest, Department of Justice. Inside was a handwritten note. "Courage doesn't begin when it's safe. It begins when someone like you decides silence is no longer an option. Thank you for stepping forward. FBI Office of Internal Oversight." He stood there for a moment reading it again, and again. Not out of pride, but because it didn't feel real yet. Meanwhile, Miguel closed his law office for 2 weeks. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to open a new one across town in the East Side neighborhood he grew up in. He called it Second Light Legal Aid. No polished glass, no receptionist in heels, just folding chairs, a cracked coffee machine, and a hand-painted sign. "If they didn't listen to you before, we will now." Serena never asked for that. She didn't demand headlines. She never posted a single word about what happened. But she did receive a message. Not on the news, not in public, just a quiet text from Emily Vaughn. "You changed me too." That was all it said. Nothing more, nothing needed. And somehow that single message meant more than a courtroom's applause. Because Emily Agent Vaughn had once believed in the chain of command above all. But watching Serena break the silence not with rage but with restraint. It broke something open inside her too. She'd always believed the system would correct itself. Now she knew better. Across the country, lawyers reopened dormant cases. Public defenders re-examined old files. And in a quiet, concrete cell in Tennessee, Troy sat on a cold bench staring at his reflection in the stainless steel toilet. He didn't curse. He didn't scream. He just repeated that same line softer now, almost like he didn't believe it anymore. "I thought I was untouchable." No one replied. Because power had already moved on. It didn't scream, it didn't punch back, it didn't need to. It simply stood still, waited, and let the truth do the rest. Emily Vaughn had seen hundreds of files, thousands of names, but none had ever come with a refusal, let alone 2. Serena Reddick had turned down a promotion to Director of Intelligence Analysis twice. Each time with the same quiet signature. No explanation, no speech. So one day, months before the courtroom incident, Emily had asked her directly, "You've earned it. Why won't you take it?" Serena didn't answer right away. She just stared out the window, eyes fixed on something far older than titles. Then finally she said, "Because I don't want the balcony seat. I want to sit where the fire is." Emily thought it was metaphor, until now. Now, watching the nation erupt with questions and reckonings, she realized it wasn't a metaphor at all. That same week, Serena gave a single private interview, Not to a national network, not to a Sunday show. She gave it to Lisa Greer. It wasn't filmed. No lights, no makeup. Just two women in a library room that smelled of old paper and fresh dust. Serena sat down, folded her hands, and said, "I'll tell you one story. Just one. Then I want you to write what you saw." Lisa nodded, already holding her recorder, but Serena spoke before she hit the button. 12 years old, county court in Arkansas. My mother, single. Black-tired, stood accused of welfare fraud. She didn't do it. Everyone knew it. But she couldn't afford a lawyer. So she lost. Serena paused. The judge never looked her in the eye. Not once. But I did. I never forgot that. Lisa's hand trembled slightly. She hit record. Serena continued. People think I chose this path because I wanted to fight. I didn't. I chose it because I wanted to understand the walls that crushed my mother and take out one brick at a time. Lisa asked softly. Why not take the shortcut? Why not accept power when it came? Serena leaned forward. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder. Because no one ever changed a system by sitting at the top of it. I chose the hard way. Because no one else did. Lisa's article went viral in under 6 hours. It wasn't just reporting, it was revelation. She titled it, Silence with Teeth. And for it, she was later awarded the Penrose Prize for Courage in Journalism. But Serena never mentioned the piece, never posted it, never even read the comments. She was already back at work on another investigation. Another town, another courthouse. Langston sent her a photo once of that old courtroom in Tennessee, now under review by federal monitors. Miguel sent a text, too. 3 wrongful convictions overturned this week. You started that. But Serena never replied with celebration. Just one sentence. We're not done. Meanwhile, across the country in barbershops and living rooms, people spoke her name. Not like a hero, more like a mirror. Because everyone knew someone like Serena. Someone who kept their head down, did the work, and never demanded applause. But now, for once, the world was listening. And her silence said more than any podium ever could. It wasn't a stage. There were no lights, no podium, no rows of press. Just a classroom in a quiet high school. 3rd period. Plastic chairs, open notebooks, and the soft hum of the old AC unit. Serena Reddick walked in like any guest speaker. Simple blazer hair pulled back, no entourage. She smiled, but only just enough, like someone who knew how heavy silence could be. The students didn't know what to expect. Some had seen the viral clip. Some had read the article. But only one had been there that day. Her name was Ava Porter. 15 now. Glasses. Quiet. She sat in the 2nd row, same notebook from 5 months ago, still folded at the corner where she'd written, "Why is no one stopping this?" The teacher introduced Serena briefly, just her name and the phrase former federal investigator. But everyone in the room already knew what those few words left out. Serena started simply. No speech, no agenda, just, "I came to listen. And maybe answer if you're ready to ask." A hand went up, then another, then a dozen. Questions flew. Did you know the phone would ring? Was it scary to go undercover like that? Do you think Troy will ever apologize? Serena answered them all with grace measured, honest, never dramatizing. She didn't need to. But then came a pause, and a smaller voice. Ava stood up, hands slightly trembling, but her eyes were steady. "Why didn't you shout?" she asked. "When he humiliated you, why didn't you say something back?" The room went still. Serena's expression didn't change, but something in her shoulders softened, like she'd been waiting for that exact question, from that exact girl. She walked to the front of the room, took a breath, and then answered not with authority, but with a kind of quiet knowing that silenced even the buzzing light overhead, because shouting would have made it about me, and about him, but silence. That made the whole country stop and watch what he did. She paused. Sometimes, silence is the only thing loud enough to break through noise. Ava's eyes shimmered, but she didn't blink. She just nodded. Class ended 10 minutes later. There was no applause, no selfies, no hashtags. Serena gathered her bag and slipped out the door like she'd never been there. But Ava stayed behind. She flipped to the back of her notebook, opened to a blank page, and began to write. Slowly. Deliberately. I want to be her, but louder, and sooner. Outside the bell rang. The world moved on. But in that little classroom, something had shifted. Not in volume, not in headlines, but in direction. And for Serena Reddick, that was always the point. Not to be remembered, but to be followed. Fade out. No music, just the scratch of a pen. And one breath, quiet, steady, ready. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or even feel just a little more hope for what justice can still become, then this is your moment to pass it on. What we witnessed wasn't just about Serena Reddick. It was about the quiet power of conviction, about how dignity doesn't need to shout to be heard, and about how one act of courage seen through the eyes of a young girl can ripple into a whole new generation. At Mr. Mack's Stories, we don't just tell stories, we uncover the quiet ones, the overlooked, the underestimated, the silenced. Because sometimes those are the stories that hit the hardest and stay the longest. So if this meant something to you, please, like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe again, and hit subscribe to join us for more powerful stories that speak to the heart and stir the soul. Your support means more than you know. It fuels our small but passionate team to keep bringing you content that matters. Stories that remember, stories that stand up, stories that echo. This is Mr. Mack's Stories, and we'll be right here waiting to tell the next one.